Long ago, when I was a young girl and lived in Krakow, I let the gypsy fortune teller enter the apartment. She said she would tell me what lies in store for me in exchange for something valuable. I showed her mother's brooch, and she turned it over, looked at it, and loosened my fingers. And looking at the lines, said that in a not very distant future, I make a long, long journey over mountains and wide waters. In September of 1939, the Germans defeated Poland and occupied Krakow, and many people went on all kinds of journeys and did not return. The Nazis emptied neighborhoods and villages of young people, forcing them to work in Germany. This is what happened to me. A freight train delivered me and some scores of other young girls to a station, where we were marched to barracks. The next morning, I began my new life as a worker in the Hannewacker chewing tobacco factory. Many days come to look exactly the same in the stark white factory. A man demonstrated how to spin shreds of tobacco into chewing tobacco. The work was simple, but your fingers become permanently nicotine stained. We were constantly hungry. The hunger became so unbearable that some other girls and I decided to go into town to find something to eat. Each of us wore a purple P on a yellow path to signify we were Polish prisoners. We would continue to slip out of our barracks until we were eventually caught and punished. I was transferred to the machine shop, which made small tin boxes. I was scared to death of these big, noisy machines. One day, an engineer of the factory was showing some civilians around, and they stopped to talk to me. They asked me how I liked to work and discovered I spoke German fluently. My father had once advised me to learn the language of our enemies. I am glad I listened to him for once, because I didn't know it at the time. It probably saved my life. In September of 1942, I was called to the camp office and told I was to work in the kitchen of a family named Ratschiers. Karl Ratschier was one of the civilians who talked to me in the machine shop and had remembered me. He was a contractor whose family owned a lumber yard that provided the timber to support the walls and roofs of the tunnels beside the Harz Mountains, where the Nazis were building the world's first guided missiles, V-1 and V-2. I had my own room in the attic with an alarm clock to wake me up. I was responsible for numerous duties in the Ratschier household. There were 3 small children in the house to look after. Besides running the kitchen, I had to clean the house. I also had to act as interpreter for the prison workers who cut the timber. I had a good life considering those around me. A year later, the Middlebrow Dora concentration camp was in full operation, with 60,000 slaves building the rockets in 12 miles of tunnels in the mountains. Beginning in 1943, the Germans began to lose the war. The sick were left to die. Nothing mattered anymore but staying alive. After the attack, the young Ratschiers decided to leave the town and take refuge in the woods. All of a sudden, Mr. Ratschier called me out to follow him. I couldn't imagine what he wanted from us. And at the moment I saw a revolver in his hand. He grabbed me by the hand and pushed me ahead of him. "Run as fast as you can, so that my bullet won't catch up with you." I was so scared I couldn't move. He stopped and said, "Run and don't look back." As he raised his revolver, and only then did I take off like an arrow. I heard the shots. I ran like mad. I stumbled through the forest until I got to the road where I saw a convoy of tanks. "Americans! Americans!" I hollered as loud as I could. A herd arose slowly from the cover of the machines. "Polski?" he asked. "Polski," I answered and kept on waving as they slowly drove by. I let my hands fall so that I could gather the chocolate bars and the chewing gum that the soldiers threw. In the morning, the Americans who were in the Ratchard's house asked me if there was anything in the house I wanted, because according to an order, those who work as slaves could now take anything they wanted from any German house. But there was nothing I wanted. It was April 11, 1945, and I was free. I was going home. I try to remember those who did not harm, who carried the burden of daily life. There were those who didn't help, fearing the consequences, but didn't do anything wrong. And there were those who had fists of temper and mincing eyes, but good hearts.